opinions expressed in the following are those of its participants and do not necessarily reflect those of the producers and the Six Talk Podcast Network. Also, the following contains mature material and mild language, which may not be suitable for all audiences. Discretion is advised.
For Saturday night, April the 10th, 2021, this is episode 39 of the Anime Roundtable Canada. Good evening from 6 Points, 10 minutes south of the Anime North compound in the west end of Toronto. Mike Nicolas with you. Once again, a quick reminder that you can join in on the conversation in multiple ways via email, animeroundtable@gmail.com, and via Twitter and Instagram @animeroundtable. Also, don't forget our website, animeroundtable.com, for full show notes and past episodes. As well, we do have a Discord, Facebook, and Twitch. More on that to come, hopefully in the near future. So, we're going to start with something a little different this evening. To say that the pandemic of the last 13 months has been stressful on the world would be the understatement of the last 50 years. And of course, something like anime conventions would be no exception. One by one last year, all the shows that fans have grown to love, your Anime Expos, Otakons, Anime Centrals, Anime New Yorks, and even Comic-Con and Fan Expo, you name it, all postponed because of the pandemic. And with what would be the convention season now dawning upon us for 2021, the questions surrounding the conventions this year have started to be asked. Anime North, of course, was in the same position, having cancelled the 2020 edition last year and pivoting to the virtual Momiji's online experience last July. It joined a trend of online versions of such conventions that rose up to fill in the in-person void as best as possible. And fairly early on this year, Anime North decided to once again cancel the in-person experience for 2021 and pivoted towards an online edition which will be set for the traditional Anime North weekend of May 28th to the 30th. As official podcast, we want to fulfill our obligations to the convention and talk a little Anime North right now, especially considering that submissions to fill the programming for the Anime North Stay-at-Home edition began on March 26 and will run until May the 1st. Chris Nebelsky, who is the social media coordinator of Anime North, was kind enough to join me for a chat on Thursday evening to talk about how Anime North has managed during the pandemic and to look ahead to this year's Stay-at-Home edition. Unfortunately, I had a rather careless moment again. I forgot to properly check to see if my USB microphone was set up properly, and you guessed it, it wasn't. So I was recorded on my MacBook's own microphone, and admittedly, it won't sound as good as it should. So my apologies to both Chris and to you guys listening. But in any event, here's my conversation with Anime North's social media coordinator, Chris Nebelsky. Mr. Nebelsky, it's a real pleasure to finally have you on the podcast, and thank you so much for doing this pretty much last minute.
Oh, no worries. It's I've been meaning to join you guys for 3 years now since we first talked about me coming on the podcast.
We first talked in 2019, just outside the staff registration office, and you recognized my name. I am flattered anybody will recognize me in any form, for starters.
I'm a king of random trivia to begin with, so it's actually a surprise I remember anyone's name, but other things I can remember off the top of my head. I have a hat.
Mm-hmm. I think you saw my tag at the time and saw the name Anime Roundtable on it, and we started talking because you had heard a few episodes and you expressed interest on doing the show at some point. Mm-hmm. And at that point, we had yet to learn how to do the show online because we always did the show in person. And over the last year, we've all had to learn new things and pivot.
Yep.
Which was a word we've constantly used, or I've constantly used over the last 13 months. So now that we know how to do this online, we can start having a few more people we wouldn't usually have on come on. So, as I said, thanks for finally doing this.
You're welcome.
Okay, so where do we want to start? Some of the thoughts. I know that we can only say so much about the decisions to cancel the in-person versions of Anime North over the last little bit. The sense I got from last year is it sounded like the organizing committee just want to hold off as much as possible and make that decision. Well, obviously make the right decision, but you everything the die was cast, everything was in motion to set up because I think a lot of people have to really respect that all the time that has to go in planning these things. You have to plan months and months in advance. And
For most departments at Anime North, the official planning stage starts right at the new year.
mm-hmm.
Some people, like I, pretty much operate all year round because I have to answer email questions, or not email questions, Facebook questions and Twitter questions and that, as well as put up announcements sometimes for other events to help promote them that we're partnered with. Like the Japanese Canadian Cultural Center will have events throughout the year, and we like to promote them as well.
The Halloween thing, right? If I
Yeah,
remember correctly. Is it a dance or a ball? I've never been to it.
it's originally it's a combination of a dance and a market, mostly for fan art, artist alley, and a bit of a vendors area as well. I believe the original name was Dojika. I'm probably
Okay.
pronouncing it wrong, but it's basically a Dojin event or Dojinshi event.
Okay.
And it
So,
has the ball and it has some other activities as well.
mm-hmm.
The night arcade, which is with Go's Game On Entertainment Service, helps us run. Oh, and also like their anime showings that they'll do throughout the year, including the Toronto Japanese Film Festival, which we will usually sponsor a anime or anime related film being shown
Mm-hmm.
during.
Okay. Whenever that happens, right?
It's usually a month after or a few weeks after the traditional Anime North weekend.
Right, in June. I
Mm-hmm.
remember. I do remember. And then on top of that, I know you do the Japan Canada Festival in Mississauga.
Yes.
So I've stepped into that every so often. I'm from Mississauga, just for reference, so it's my hometown. It's quite a sight. I haven't seen it on and off over the years myself. So and Anime North I know does a block of a couple hours programming on stage, if I remember correctly. But correct me if I'm wrong.
It's about an hour of programming. It just so happens it seems longer, probably because it happens right at dusk.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like at the start of it, it's daytime, and when it ends, it's night.
Mm-hmm. So unfortunately, none of that happened last year
Obvious reasons.
for obvious reasons. Okay, so you had to start the planning. Planning began in January,
Mm-hmm.
and then everything hit in mid-March last year. And
Yeah.
I know I forgot the exact date that the decision was made to cancel the in-person 2020 edition.
Well, you got to remember or realize that the actual date when the decision was made and the announcement is, I think it ended up being a few weeks difference from when
Mm-hmm.
I learned actually that we were canceling to when we announced it, because we have to get everything all set up that everyone knows behind the scenes that we are
Yeah.
not doing it to when we can say we are not doing it.
Well, yeah, even something like a cancellation requires a degree
Mm-hmm.
of planning, I'm guessing, because
Oh
you
yeah.
have to coordinate all that stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
With every single department and entity involved.
Mm-hmm.
So understood. I understood on the coordination, but and as I said, that's why I'd like to hope that regular convention goers, Anime North convention goers, can have a little bit of understanding as to what goes into the planning of all of this, whether it's
Mhm.
putting it on or, unfortunately, taking it off the table.
Sort of like
So,
just an analogy. It's like a train. When the brakes hit, it takes a while for the train to actually stop.
mhm. Okay, so let's fast forward a little bit into the year and Momiji's online experience. I guess the stay-at-home version last year,
Yes.
the online version,
Mhm.
and obviously after the did when did the conversation start to begin on having the online experience? Because obviously holding it roughly 2 months after what would have been the regular Anime North date,
Mhm.
it was a little bit of a surprise.
Well,
And
the
I want,
original conversation, I proposed the idea that if Anime North couldn't run, this is before I knew about Anime North being canceled from last year. I sent an email to the exec suggesting that we look into setting up a small online event. At that
mhm,
time, I didn't give a name for it,
okay.
and that was put on the back burner because of other things I had to do. And then once everything had got announced, we were talking about how we can do it. The original idea was to do it on the Anime North weekend and have a skeleton crew in the hotel doing all the production in that. I believe
Mhm.
three people: me, our technical director, and our sort of host.
Yes. Whose name I forgot. I'm so sorry. And I do apologize to him, but I remember the host. Because
Oh,
yet,
Andrew Kaidaj.
and Andrew was a good guide that weekend.
Mhm.
He was a good guide. Especially for, as I said, something that had to be. I mean, yeah, there was a degree of planning, but it felt there was a degree of, it had to be. It is makeshift. Let's be honest.
I
Uh,
will admit it was makeshift. It was more, as I've never really liked to refer to it as a online convention. It was more of a streaming event to me. Just
mhm,
what I think about a convention or even an online convention has a certain resonance that I wasn't even going for. I just wanted something fun originally to do on the Anime North weekend, but we put the reason we pushed it back to July was to give a little more time for planning and also the hopes of being able to use the Anime North office to do all this stuff in. Which, of course, because things happened that couldn't happen, so we did it from our own homes.
and with Andrew hosting from home, it looked like he was at home.
Yes.
Okay. So was those feelings kind of went into the name Momiji's online experience, into the MOE?
Yeah. Uh, the reason why it had that name was originally I was trying to give a few ideas for names. So the people that I basically roped in to help with running the event last year could decide or come up with other, hopefully better names. But
I guess that didn't happen.
no, it did not.
Oh, poor
everyone was
guy.
everyone came out with oh, I like Momiji's online experience. Moe, that's a fun, cute name.
Oh yeah, well, did you see the jokes coming?
Well, the original idea that was that we were not going to refer to it outright as Moe, or that was my original idea. And I was like, oh, it so happens to come out like that. How cute! And our
It's
graphics department, particularly Ken, really ran with the Moe branding, and so that's how it came out.
and it just stuck.
It just stuck.
For better or worse, it just stuck.
Yes.
Because we were all of us around the table when we heard about the name, we were laughing for a bit. We have to admit that. I think it was memorable. Well, the name was memorable.
Mhm.
And I'd like to think, Anime North has always had this relatively happy vibe, the way I've always seen it, right?
That's good to hear.
Well, to me, it has a. To me, it's a little bit. How would I put this? Happy chaos sometimes to it. That's what it feels like walking when I walk through the compound. We on the podcast refer to the whole corridor, the airport Dixon Road corridor and 27 area as the Anime North compound. And on the weekend, it transforms. I'm sure you know that everyone there's
Oh
a certain vibe to the area when the weekend happens, and I've noted that many times on the show that I actually work nearby, so I would pass by the area on a regular basis, almost a daily basis, at least underneath on 27,
yeah. Hmm.
and it has a more empty feel,
Oh
obviously.
yeah. I've
So,
been through the office at the office a few times, while even outside of regular meetings,
so
and
you know what
it
it's like.
it's empty even when there's other events going on. It just is way different with the Anime North crowd as opposed to say some like the Delta's conference center area having a teachers convention. Or there was one time actually there was a bodybuilding convention going on,
Oh wow.
which is the most different thing I think you can have from an anime convention.
Yeah, well, keep in mind what you have sometimes happening every couple of years across the street at the TCC,
Hmm.
the Conservative Party policy or leadership conventions.
I've only remembered two. One was a provincial, and the one was it 2017.
Yeah, the leadership convention.
Yeah, there's also one earlier in the last decade for the provincial convention, which
Hmm.
was I think probably better run insofar as they didn't have news reports of some party members saying "damn you, Animu convention" or
Oh
something to that
boy,
effect,
oh
or
boy.
blaming the Animu convention.
As I said, happy chaos,
Hmm.
happy chaos. But it's always a sight to see, to watch when it happens. And as I said, sometimes we see fandom does have its ugly sides, but Anime North Weekend is usually when I see the best of fandom. I've always said that.
Hmm.
So, I mean, right down to people helping out, the various forms of inclusions, the relabeling of washrooms.
Hmm.
And even there was one year also, there was a car accident that happened right on the main intersection there. And
Yes.
you even had con staff just direct traffic in the immediate minutes before police got there.
Hmm.
Then that was in a drive, and that was in a rainstorm. That's one memory I have on the topic of the goodness of fandom.
Hmm.
So just so you're just that's a story those are stories I'll always tell about Anime North. Okay, so decision was made to do the online version, call for submissions. What do we say about the submissions? I mean, looking at what was ended up being shown that weekend. It was the last weekend of July, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
There was some. I was impressed. I have to say I enjoyed quite a bit of it. I mean, much of it's blurry now, and
Hmm.
correct me if I'm wrong. Is much of it still on the Twitch?
It's still on the Twitch. All of it's still on the Twitch
Okay, so
channel.
and there's 2 days for it, and there was 2 days of programming that day.
3 days.
I only saw 3 days. My
Yes.
apologies.
6 hours for Friday, 12 hours for Saturday, and 6 hours for the Sunday.
Wow, so we had 24 hours of programming
Yes.
that that weekend, full 24 hours. That's See, I didn't. I thought it was. I thought it was like closer to 18. So I'm really impressed with how that came about.
Hmm.
A couple of them really did catch my attention. There was. I know for a friend, she took great interest in the Manga Planet presentation,
Hmm.
and I mean, I didn't know about the. I don't know too many manga services online, and that was one of the first time I'd personally seen anybody behind one of those services start to speak. That was a nice little bit. There was a YouTube channel called Pause and Select. I think it was one of the first ones that happened on the Friday. They did a presentation about how disasters and hardships that actually happened in Japan
Hmm.
kind of inform and give the type of tone for their fiction and the anime that we ended up seeing. And I thought that was a really uh, a really good one.
Yeah, I thought so too.
That out of all of them, that was my personal favorite, by the way. And we're actually endeavoring to try and get Pause and Select to appear on the show at some point, just to
Hmm.
talk a little bit more about that, because I think that was a wonderful one. And then I know that there was another one, and I forgot her name, but I know she did an explanation of Chinese comics as well, as they've become a little bit more popular. Those are the three I remember. But what about you? What came out? Well, first of all, what was your favorite among the topics? And then,
I,
well, just out of curiosity, there's one that you're willing to.
unfortunately, it's all a blur to me.
Oh, well,
I
some.
I really hit hard that last month, getting everything together, getting things sorted out that we had the right amount of programming,
Mhm.
like not too much, not too little. So
Well, it was okay, and you wanted, and it was a worthwhile weekend, I think. So, what did you learn from it? Was there like, what was your initial takeaway from the first experience then?
the initial takeaway is, hey, this was fun. I don't want to do it again.
That's the first one.
It was the first one. I was pretty burnt through all
So,
my
so all
energy
that.
on that, and then I suggested we do this again this year when I found out.
Yeah.
Actually, I originally put out feelers of people who were interested in doing again when for the traditional weekend, even though we were still planning to have it during. We were still having the January or the July Anime North
Mm.
event. I still had the idea to do something during traditional Anime North weekend so that everyone could have a bit of Anime North.
Yeah. So let's fast forward to 2021 now,
Mhm.
and the decision, like the officially, AN was on standby over the decision, but it made the call to cancel. What was the announcement? I'm trying to remember announcement date again. I'm just trying to remember here.
I believe it was
February
February
23rd. I
23rd,
can see.
yes.
Yeah. So the decision was made. I'd say with certainly in with a lot of time to spare, because I think the decision on 2020 was made a little bit oh, well after February 23rd last year. I think it was into March.
It was mid
Yeah.
March, I believe, last
Okay.
year.
So
But
so
that,
the just
in
yeah,
both cases, I think you got to remember we survived SARS
yeah, the
quite
city.
well
Well, yeah,
without having to cancel or anything. So everyone was hopeful that this was just going to be another SARS.
at the time.
Yeah, at the time, and then
When 13 months ago, we're talking, right?
yes, and then
Okay.
it certainly did not turn out that way. So
Obviously, hindsight's always 2020, but I guess we're also a little surprised that it's lasted this long. But
mhm,
but you had a little bit more heads up, I'd say. I think the organizing committee had a little bit more heads up in terms of making the decision, seeing how the last years went, and be able to
mhm,
get a better sense of the trend. And the trend just didn't work out.
yes,
It just didn't look like it was going to work out in time for late May. So the decision was made 3 months out, more than 3 months out to
mhm.
make the call. And it sounded like almost immediately the pivot was made to turn it into an online experience again. Because I think it was like in the same breath that when the announcement was made, it said still join us again
Yes.
for an online
The
stay-at-home
original,
version.
as I said, the original idea for this year's was just to hold something during the traditional weekend, even though we were having the big convention, well, a reduced size convention in July.
Hmm.
So that was still formulating. And it just so happened that, hey, we're going to be canceling. So this is what I was told. We're going to be canceling the event or postponing the event till next year. So can you hurry up with the little bit of information we need to announce? Like at the time, the name wasn't decided until a week before the announcement of the postponement of this year's event.
Okay. The stay at home edition. That's the official name of this week of the Anime North weekend this year,
Yep,
right?
Anime North Stay at Home edition. Yeah, Stay at Home edition.
Okay. And that problem. See, it works a little. Obviously, to be able to hold an event on the traditional weekend probably will. I'd like to think it's better. It's a little better because we've all
Also,
become. It's a routine. It's
yes,
become a tradition, so to speak.
because you have to remember, Anime North originally did not happen on the U.S. Memorial Day weekend. The
Mm,
first one actually happened in August,
August.
near the beginning of
August of
August, at the
Yeah,
Missionary.
August 1997. Don't have to remind me because I was at it. Well, I mean, as I said, there's full circle moments in the pandemic
Mhm.
that, like, there's various Anime North landmarks that have become full circle moments in the pandemic as well. I mentioned this in December. The first vaccine that was given in Canada were given to um, personal support workers at the Michener Institute,
Mm.
where the first AN took place. And then fast forward now, one of the mass vaccination clinics is happening at the Toronto Congress Centre.
Mhm.
And there's landmarks here that dotted throughout Anime North's history that are having some key moments also for the pandemic as well, or key milestones in Toronto
Mhm.
concerning the pandemic. And it's a point that I think is worth mentioning. It's a nice conversation piece, but I think it's also maybe a source of pride also that AN has taken place on at such places too, such important places in terms of the city.
Mhm.
So that's where we sit now. Okay, so had plenty of heads up, decided on the name.
Mhm.
That's where we are, and that's basically where we are now. We're setting the submissions up for the online edition.
Mhm.
So let's go through that for a couple minutes here. From what I could gather, you're looking at 3 versions for submissions.
Yes, the online presentations that similar to what we did last year, though we're opening up to also taking an hour-long submissions as instead of just the half hour that we did last year.
Hmm.
Which the half hour did work out well because it, I think, helped the people have a more concise panel, chop off some of the extra stuff that they didn't really need. Also, a lot of panels have time for Q&A, which you can't really do with a pre-recorded panel.
Hmm.
And
Okay,
we're also having roundtable discussion, or
so
we're
a
opening
live
to.
version. Yeah. So we're having. Remind me from last year, how much in the way of live components did we have with Momiji's online experience?
Uh,
I could only remember maybe Q&As, but that's about it. Like a Q&A with.
the Q&A with the guests, that was
Mhm.
some of that. We had the performances, the 404s and D20 live. I believe both were live, as well as the dance, the traditional Japanese dance workshop on the Sunday. I can't
Okay,
remember what the group's name is. I'm sorry if they're listening to this.
I'll be honest, they probably aren't. Just for reference, don't feel like you can only don't feel too bad about it. I'll just say you're only human after all.
Yeah,
So, how much more of a live component are you hoping for this time around?
this time around, I hope for a third to a half of our time. We're doing 24 hours again, so 8 to 12 hours.
Mhm. 8 to
Since
12
we're
hours each day, so 6, 12, 6, right?
yes,
Okay. So we're so the preparations are now in place.
Mhm.
And have you seen any submissions yet?
I have not. Our panels department is doing the fan content submissions.
Mhm.
Oh, there's other ones besides the fans, the
Oh, for
presentation
reference,
submission.
just for reference, I did speak with Dave Merrill a little earlier today, so I know that Anime Hell is being planned.
Oh yeah, I don't think we
It,
could do this without Anime Hell.
this is one of the central spots for Anime Hell now,
Mhm. And he's
since
also
that's
doing
become
a anime 1981 panel.
that's within his MO for sure.
Yep, he did
Within his MO.
1980 last year.
Mhm. Now that's his tradition too. So
Yep.
to do talk about the retro stuff.
Hmm.
And on that note, actually, let's a quick aside on the note of retro for a couple seconds. We're going to talk a little bit more about it a little later in the show, but I guess we can get Chris's hot take. Word came down within the last hour before we taped that there's been an agreement with Harmony Gold and Big West, and a significant portion of the Macross titles have been given clearance to be shown now outside of Japan. And we were just talking about this just before we started recording. What's your quick take, Chris?
I just remember back in the day. I've been in this game long enough to say back in the day now. That this was one of the Macross was one of the titles or franchises that were the this will never be licensed again type of thing. That in Legend of the Galactic Heroes, which is another thing that was licensed within the recent few years.
Mhm.
So I guess is there any more titles, big name titles that are on the no go list?
You know, that's a good question. I think we'll ask James on that a bit later. So, but yeah, I guess my first reaction is surprise, considering the all the animosity that had been known to exist concerning Harmony Gold and the way they've
Mhm.
gatekeeped, so to speak, the rest of Macross from the
I,
rest of the world.
I've always wondered how it worked because I know in Japan there was a big court case between was it Big West and Studio New, or I'm maybe getting the wrong partners because there's a whole bunch of studios that had.
It's a messy story and worth and probably a history lesson, but then I'd have to catch up on my history.
Mhm. I know
But
I know there was that case that the fined, and at least to the Japanese parties who owned what. But I think Harmony
and I think
Gold probably went by their original agreement. So I always thought one side of the ocean was working on a different idea than the other side. But
hmm,
I could be completely wrong because
there's a story there. No, there's a story though. Yeah,
there's
but I
there's
but
a lot
I
of stories on that.
oh yeah, and I guess the only reaction I have is surprise. Good, pleasant surprise, but surprise, real surprise. Uh, I don't know how many times I'll say surprise in the next 60 seconds because that's what it really was.
Well, what surprised me was in the mid '90s that Macross 2 and Macross Plus were licensed by Manga Entertainment during this. I guess Harmony Gold was sleeping at the time.
Yeah, I guess and I wouldn't doubt that there was some litigation over that. And as I said, that's a bit of a history lesson because
Hmm.
obviously nothing else has come out since then, and and Macross 2 and Macross Plus is once again in purgatory.
Hmm.
Nobody, since there's no official overseas license for that
Hmm.
anywhere. From if memory serves me right, but yeah, there's that, and that's the big headline of the last
Hmm.
24 hours in the anime manga world.
I think one title we won't see over here would be the Macross 7
So maybe
series.
that's the most line comes in, right? In that
Yeah,
news
because
release.
from what I heard, they were talks of bringing Macross 7 in like decades ago. But the main problem was they'd have to basically combine the cash of all the big licensors at the time to try and get it because of the music licensing fees.
Hmm.
Because, well, you can't have Macross without music.
No, that goes without saying. That goes without saying, and I think that'll be the next set of hurdles. I think
Mhm.
in this story. But as I said, a real significant development this evening.
Mhm.
Okay, Okay, so you haven't had a chance to see any of the submissions yet, huh?
I have not. No.
Mm-hmm. Will
I will
you?
probably send an email off to our panels department this weekend to see what we have so far.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, this is their first real test. I know with fingers now in the background.
Hmm.
And fingers to the listeners, Fingers Delarose. That's is that how I pronounce his last name?
I believe so. I could be
Fingers.
completely wrong.
Fingers is a fixture when it comes to the panels. He's the guy behind the panels you see at Anime North.
Hmm.
So he's lurking in the shadows in some form. Well, he had been. He had held the position almost since day one, from what I remember. Certainly for a very long time. And he stepped down from main duties last late last year.
Hmm.
So the crew handling the panels now is well, at least the head of panels now is fairly new to the position. Probably had been participating in it for some years before,
He
but
has a lot of experience with organizing cons,
Mhm.
so
But yeah, there's a new head of the
yeah.
panels. So this is his first real go at it. No, no, it doesn't really count. It's an online version, but this is still kind of a significant first test for him,
Hmm.
I'd say. So some of the things there, huh? Okay. Well, no, seriously. Well,
Our
there's.
I've talked to him before, like
Mhm,
at the meetings. Uh, I think he actually probably was one of the reasons why we expanded to do a bit more of variety, because along with the online submissions and the roundtable discussions, we also have spots open for workshops.
mhm.
Basically, people demonstrating their fan or Japanese cultural craft or art and taking questions on it.
Yeah, I think I know where you're going on that.
Mhm.
And if you look at the history of Anime North, there have always been these little workshops, whether
Mhm.
it's drawing. Kimono is probably one of the more popular ones, the ones that, or at least the one that sticks out to me.
Mhm.
So, and I know, and I spoke with some of the people who've done the kimono workshops and discussions, and I know that one of the key big things that they were talking about over the last year was the one kimono project that was being done in Japan in celebration of the Olympics.
Mhm.
So that had been the talk of the kimono community here in North America, which did finish up, by the way,
Mhm.
just in time for what would have been the Olympics last year. So it'll be all set and ready to go. Just for reference, one of I had a friend who was able to take a picture with the Canadian kimono too. Another
Oh.
story altogether, but lucky is the word that comes to mind. Okay, so how will the process work from this point? The submissions go until May. What is it?
May
May
1st.
1st.
I believe that's where I cut the line because we have to figure out what timing or when to time slot each thing,
Okay. Okay. Well.
uh, which takes a while because we have to jiggle things around. What live things obviously can only happen at certain times
Mhm.
because people do not want to suddenly find out the week before, oh, I have this at Sunday at noon and I'm not available Sunday at noon.
Mhm. Okay.
That's not a good idea to foist on someone just to begin with.
Well, you want to
And
give
not
them
for
all.
be first off being rude and second off resulting in no one showing up and having a blank spot in your programming.
Okay. So submissions are ongoing. Hopefully, we get a good variety of stuff to
Hmm.
talk about this year. And well, before we go, is there anything else? I told you before we're going to make a pitch to you to do a live version of the roundtable. Traditionally, we've always done the podcast late night there as a recap for the day's events because we've always done late night tapings at
Hmm.
Anime North, and we always did 2 nights. With Norm coming on during the second night. You are the second Anime North staff member to come on this podcast, by the way. So congratulations, Chris.
Thank you. It's nice to know that I'm number 2.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, considering who's number 1, not a bad guy to follow.
That's true.
You're
That
talking about
reminds me, we were thinking about asking Norm to record himself doing the traditional Anime North right as the con starts chant.
Mm-hmm.
But I had to kibosh that on the fact that I didn't feel like having to have such a big microphone warning
Oh boy.
before that.
Oh boy, yeah. And considering how Norm's voice can sometimes be, and the way
Well, I believe he was a sergeant in the armed forces at one point.
well, we know Norm. I mean, we know Norm can
Yeah.
command a room when he wants to, and like he can command a room like a boss.
I think he doesn't need the microphone when he does the chant in the ballroom.
No, you don't. No, he wouldn't. And as I said, if listeners have heard Norm's appearances during the Anime North episodes, they'll know what we mean pretty quickly. But well, as I said, our pitch was to hopefully be able to get a chance to do a version during the late night hours of the programming. So,
well, I can announce that you guys will be on Saturday at 11 p.m. to midnight.
So we'll have a chance to do an episode, our first live episode, really.
Mm-hmm.
And you can join us. You can join myself and the rest of the gang for that. More than likely, James will be by. James doesn't have a late night track to worry about programming. That's his usual. That's the usual thing he usually does at Anime North. He programs one of the late night tracks that happen there. And we'll talk at length about about things during that weekend. We'll determine it as the date comes by. But thank you, Chris. Just want to say a quick thank you.
Want to mention 2 things. One, Anime North Stay at Home Edition will be on the Twitch channel Anime North Compass on May 28th to 30th. And we're also going to be taking donations through Extra Life through the Anime North member.
Yes.
Page.
Yeah, we forgot. Thank you for mentioning that. Yes. So once again, Twitch, just like last year with Momiji's online experience, and then we're gonna do Extra Life again. This is a big thing. This is an important. Mm-hmm. This is always an important initiative to do this, and I think a lot of people in the geek gaming community, science fiction communities, I think Extra Life seems to be the choice these days.
And we're doing it for the Sick Kids Hospital.
Mm-hmm. What was the? Do you remember what was the final total from last year's?
Last year's were just a bit north of 100 or 1,500 USD, because Extra Life's originally a American charity that also takes Canadian donations for Canadian hospitals.
Okay,
so it ends up being something around $2,000 Canadian.
Oh, 1,500. Okay, so 1,500 American. Mm-hmm. Do we have a goal for this year, or we'll wait before announcing that?
We are hoping for 2,500 Canadian or 2,500 American. We're hoping for more Canadian, obviously.
Okay, so there's our goals. Obviously, we'll make mention of Anime North, the stay-at-home edition, in the weeks that it comes on. But Chris, appreciate you coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Willing to come back again just to do a regular roundtable with us?
Sure.
We'll talk the headlines.
Sounds like fun.
Okay, Chris Nebelsky, Anime North's social media
coordinator.
I want to get the terminology correct. Chris Nebelsky, social media coordinator for Anime North. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
When we return, the roundtable will convene after the break on the Six Talk Podcast Network.
Do Japanese people have longer intestines than Westerners? Can sexy things give you anime-style nosebleeds? Why are vegetables so insulting in Japanese? If you want to find out the answers to those questions and many others, then I've got a podcast for you. It's called Ichimon Japan. That's ICHIMON Japan. Ichimon means one question, and every episode we ask a question about Japan and dig deep into that topic. So if that sounds interesting to you, check us out at japankyo.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
Just have to give me a couple seconds here. I just got to make sure my microphone is properly plugged in. Okay, good. And the podcast now continues in front of a virtual audience. Thank you for listening and online via the Six Talk Podcast Network, official podcast Anime North, as the Anime Roundtable has now convened. So let's go once around the table. Mike Nicolas, once again joined, as always, by James Austin, Kevin Ng, Mohamed Sharmarke, and Geoff Greig. So, as we begin this second segment, let's look back for a couple minutes. So, let's talk a little bit about what's just been presented over the last week or so. Where do you want to go? Do you want to go with the conversation with Chris, or do you want to go with the Space Eater chat last week?
Go Space Eater chat.
Let's talk the Space Eater chat for a couple minutes then. Okay. Mo, Geoff, Kevin, what do you think? Give me a thought. I'm trying to remember it now.
I think the thing that stood out to me, I'm a very big fan of opening and ending sequences. So your conversation at the end there, as far as songs that maybe didn't fit the series, I've never seen the series, but how well does Freckles match Kenshin?
It's the funny part. The story with Kenshin, everyone always said this was one of those cases where they went with rock music, and this was like in the late 90s. Because remember, it was when Sony Music really started to take its influence in their anime work, right? I think it was one of the more noteworthy earlier cases of established music artists making their way into anime soundtracks. And I'll say this much. At first blush, none of the music sounded samurai-ish, I guess, right? Certainly didn't hear any Enka stuff on it, like Way of the House Husband. We'll get to that in a little bit. But it never really... at first blush, all that... like it was mainly rock music. J-rock type music, I'd say.
Well, it definitely pumped you up to watch an episode, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's the thing. But it never felt out of place. Okay. None of the music felt out of place there when I think about it. Although maybe there's a certain bias showing up because obviously I'm a big Kenshin fan myself. But none of it really felt out of place.
I guess part of that for me is that I think that I was probably introduced to Freckles first as a DDR song.
Oh yeah, okay.
So to have that kind of, when I was like, perusing different anime openings, a couple months or a year later, it's like, oh, it's the song from DDR, but in Japanese. So it maybe seems a little bit. I've always thought it was an interesting to have such an upbeat, fun song, and not that there's a lot of hardcore violence in the opening. There's, I think, one scene, but with a fairly wandering samurai, I think as for the English subtitle or the English title, and sort of knowing vaguely about the story, it seemed like an interesting sort of a companion song for the series. But I think it again, having not seen the series, I will trust you that it's a fitting song.
As I said, it just never felt out of place to me.
And I guess for both of us, Mike, when we first heard it, we didn't hear it in that presence. We heard it with Kenshin and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So it just kind of grew on us in that way.
Yeah, that's a big part of it. And it's worth noting, Freckles Sobakasu was one of the bigger singles that year. So much so that Judy and Mary actually performed it at the Kohaku that year. I think it was 97, if memory serves me right. No, it was probably before that, 96 or 97. I'll have to double check. But they did perform it live as part of the big New Year's show. on NHK.
I kind of see what Geoff is getting at, though. Seems a smidge too peppy for Kenshin. Granted, it's early on, but yeah,
I
it's
wouldn't even say peppy. I think it's just the more bubbly nature of it. Like I think the tone is right. It just seems really cheerful for something. Because as far as reference, the only Kenshin media I think I've seen is the first or second live action movie.
Okay.
okay.
Maybe, well, now that you bring it up, keep in mind also the context of the episodes that they were shown in. And I guess I'm going to start dating myself or it would depend on if you watched the anime originally. The original set of episodes, the original arc, it's the Wandering Samurai arc, which is referred to in English. It was fairly episodic.
Yeah,
right? And it just established the characters,
Okay.
and then it got really dramatic, and then at that point they changed the theme song, but it became what is it? I think it was One Half by Makoto Kawamoto, if memory serves me correct, which was another like folky type song,
and then there was that TM Revolution song too,
which was a closing theme song, right? That's another story altogether about TMR's. It wasn't TMR. I was thinking Larkon Ciel. No, TMR. Yeah, I know where you're going with that. So, I mean, the stories behind the music of Kenshin can. No, it's now blurry to me all these years later. But give me a little bit, and I can come too. Trust me.
It's kind of fine because it was early on. Like, if they actually did say like the Inishi arc and then they used that song, that would have been weird. But because it's early on, like you said, because I've read most of Kenshin, and yes, it is fairly episodic in the beginning, then like yeah, it still works.
And as I said, there's a bias. I acknowledge my bias about it because it's one of my top 5 easily.
I just thought it was an interesting, I guess, topic or talking point. Like I racked my brain trying to think of other, songs that didn't fit.
Any song that wouldn't have fit their show.
Yeah, and the only other thing I can think of, I think it's the 5th maybe opening of Sergeant Frog. It's a jam project, really epic orchestral thing. Same jam project did a opening for the American Transformers animated.
Oh boy.
And both of these jam projects, very epic, almost operatic things, and Sergeant Frog is very much a gag comedy show, so that's the only other thing I could think of.
Okay. I mean, as I said, I'm not familiar with Sergeant Frog or I'm about as familiar with it as you would be with Kenshin, Geoff. So, fair point. But hey, it's one of those prove me wrong type theories, I guess, when I said that. But at least it's worth a discussion, and we could be here for hours. And we've already used half the time for the episode with the interview. Anything else stick out from the Space Heater though? Or do you want to talk about the conversation with Chris?
The video game talk's always fun.
Yeah.
Sorry? Oh, the video games.
There's Sony, yes.
Oh boy, yeah, I know, and everyone, a lot of people seem to be up in arms because now with the announcement, it sounds like a lot of legacy titles could be lost in the ether, as James likes to put it.
And it continues on with the talk that we'll get onto later with Netflix and Sony and stuff like that, and with the internal struggles that Sony's always had and stuff like that. And at the moment, it looks like Japan isn't on the winning side. It's North America, because they used to be about the hardware and all this stuff, and now it's all about the content and getting those hits out. And PS5 and that's all about getting those big hits out from developers like Naughty Dog, and then as we see, they're trying to take those properties and then turn them into movies or other forms of entertainment, and then maybe sell them off to other things. And we've seen that with Uncharted, with The Last of Us, and of course with Ghosts of Tsushima now.
Well, yeah, it's all about the vertical integration, right? I mean, you gotta leverage it as much as possible, right?
Yeah. Well, as I said, we're we'll get to a little bit of that.
And as they've said, unfortunately, backwards compatibility is the most requested feature, but it's the most little used, and they supposedly have the numbers on it, which is sad, but there's got to be a way to save that, that pass, because some of them we'll never see them again because they're only on those digital marketplaces, unfortunately.
You just
Okay.
keep your old systems then.
Yeah, well, that's easier said than done too, because ultimately, even if you don't touch your system, sometimes they just break down.
Well, no, but you can go and buy a PS3 for like $60 off of Facebook Marketplace.
60, maybe. Well, then get to me because that's what I have too.
It's really
As
not.
they say,
I don't think
nothing lasts forever, right?
Well, in that conversation, I was more thinking PS2s. So,
no, those used consoles, if you find them secondhand, they're not expensive overall.
I wouldn't doubt that actually.
But it's going to be more conversation for many years down the road, or a couple of decades, as we say.
And certainly a conversation
trickier, but the console itself is not too difficult to find.
Okay. Well, it's certainly going to be a conversation among gamers right now. And for reference, it's Neil, for reference, sent me something on Facebook, and that's the crux of his likely return to the show. But that's another story, I guess. And we're just trying to work out those details. But I'm not surprised that Neil would have voiced such an opinion, for starters. And when he finally reappears, we'll talk about that a little bit more in the future. But it's also consistent with what he's historically thought. Okay, so what else? What else from the space heater? Oh well, do we want to mention the people are showing off their Demon Slayer tickets online now?
I did see that. When I saw the tickets on sale, I got very jealous, and I'm like, it's just...
Yeah, I know. They're there. Wait for the digital.
Well, I think ours, as we said, right? It's like the middle of April, I think, is when they'll show up for Cineplex, but it'll probably be the same cinemas that we saw before. So Atlanta, Canada, one in Saskatchewan, and then for whatever reason, there's still theaters open in Quebec.
I know we said something about that last week. Okay. So from the space heater chat to just now, I sent you guys the rock version of the conversation I had with Chris Nebelsky on Thursday. So what's your takeaways from that? Whoever listened to it, I don't know who did amongst you four.
I thought, wow, that's how the Moe name came about.
Well, usually, as they say, the first idea is usually the best.
Yeah, and it's stuck.
Usually.
Well, the thing was, it was meant as a code name. It sounded like, or a placeholder, but nothing took its place. Great story, bro. Well, anything else? First of all, just a quick preface, and this is an apology to Chris, aside from the microphone. I actually did forget that they did have the July live in-person convention. That was initially on the table. That was the plan was always to have, I think, the online version during the traditional Anime North weekend, and then hopefully, if things cleared, they would have had the limited version of the in-person in late July. I think opening weekend of the Olympics, which are also, who knows what's going to happen with that. And obviously, now we know the story. It became obvious pretty quickly that July was probably not going to be possible, so they just canned it right away, and they stuck with the Anime North at Home edition. That's the official branding that they're going to use for the online convention that'll happen in May.
Yeah, it's like a lot of conventions, they've had to pivot again and stuff like that. And it's like, okay, we had hope that we could do it in person and stuff like that, but a lot of regions are just not up to that yet. Mm-hmm. So they had to pivot back to the digital, and a lot of people have learned a lot of things over the last year of handling these digital events, and different conventions have handled it differently, like up in Montreal where it was a paid event for OtakuThon.
And yeah, well, how did Otakuthon go? What was the buzz on that?
I'm not sure because I didn't actually pay to get in, so I'm intrigued to see how they did because it was one of the few that had that setup where they had a platform and you paid to get in and stuff like that. So I'd be intrigued to see how it went and what lessons they learned compared to the others that went the Twitch route and did it for free.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think I appreciated the conversation because we don't really go too deep, but or into the high levels of the decision making within Anime North, but it did peel back a little bit the curtain as to some of the things that did happen behind the scenes, a few of the things that happened there as the decisions were made, and that the decisions were, as far as I could tell, they did think them through. To be fair, but they had to keep it as much under wraps as possible because they had to let a lot of people know. And we've talked about the sometimes decentral,
Contracts.
the well, yeah, and it's not, and you know how every department really does operate and goes out and does its own thing, and then they just come together just to make sure everyone's on the same page. And they
Well,
had to take their time to do that. And it's worth remembering that the staff of Anime North, yes, you have your absolute top members of the organizing committee, but the staff really gets up there in terms of hundreds, if not four figures.
yeah, like it's really grown. Like it used to be that it was just a lot of the university clubs and just a few people that got together. But over the last 2 decades, it's grown so much that it's like some of them are their own separate entities. And then, as you said, they come together and we make sure everyone's on the same page and stuff like that. So you got to make sure everything is in order on that end. So it does take time, and then time with the partners and stuff like that, all the hotels and stuff like that, and the Congress there for contracts. But as they said, and they messaged to the general public as well, that some of them were kind of relieved that it wasn't going to go through and stuff like that because they understood the situation we were in with COVID and stuff like that. That just wasn't going to be possible. It wasn't in their best interests either, even though it's one of their biggest money makers.
Oh yeah, it's the Black Weekend for Dixon and Airport, right? Yeah, Black Friday. This is Black Weekend for that stretch.
Yeah, as you mentioned, it's a different thing every other day of the week, right?
Mm-hmm. And as I said, I did appreciate getting a little bit better of a sense of the behind the scenes there, as everything unfolded. And obviously, as noted, there were lessons from how that went down last year, and they're applying them as best as they could to this year. So
yeah, if the programming is going to be more like, one event after the other, does that mean that you won't have to worry about competing with Anime Hell this year?
more than likely. Actually, on that note, well, just to clarify the submission process, or what they're looking for in the submissions. First of all, the submissions can be for either 30-minute or 60-minute presentations. They can be online pre-taped presentations, roundtable discussions, or online workshops. And they are looking for as much as well-rounded and variety as possible. So that's what they're looking for. The submissions go until May the 1st. I don't exactly know when Anime Hell would be. I guess if we're going to go with all the traditions, it'll be held on the Friday again.
I think it'd be Friday night and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And
And
I
yes,
know
no,
that they held it on that night last year, even though there was no Anime North and stuff like that. And Dave Merrill made
Oh
it
yeah.
happen through everything, foibles and all, and everyone enjoyed it,
Mhm.
even the foibles.
Well, talking with Dave, he's starting to look through ideas right now. And no, we won't be head to head against them. No. But once again, Chris announced during the interview that yes, we have agreed to do a live version of the Anime Roundtable. It'll probably be the last thing that happens on the Saturday. That's Saturday night, May 29th, I believe, and it'll be 11 p.m., which is the traditional time we've done tapings at Anime North. Although this time around we'll actually start at 11, not set up between 11 and 11:30. But yes, we are now set to do a live version, a live video version, Kevin, of Anime Roundtable. And presumably the guidelines for roundtable discussions we're asked to use Zoom. So I think when the schedule is more firmed up, when after May 1st, we'll start to coordinate with Anime North, with Chris and the social media gang, how they want us to do our show for Anime North. And as I said, it's mentioned on Twitch. I did make it a point to look at the Twitch channel, Anime North Compass, earlier this evening before we all met up. And you know what's the most recent thing on it, right? Anybody?
Last year's online experience.
Yeah, the Momiji online experience. That's the most recent thing. So, it's otherwise the Twitch channel hasn't been touched. So,
I'm not
comment
sure
domain.
if
There's going to be quite a bit.
I'm not sure if there is a Twitch channel for the video game portion because, as we said, right, they all work under their different banners and then come together as one, so to speak. And I can't remember because remember they did streaming for the video game portion, but I'm not sure if that was done under its own separate banner. So it would have been interesting to see since they can't do it at the Sheridan for them. That they wouldn't have done a few things with that on their main Twitch channel. That would have been interesting.
Yeah, that's actually a fair. You know what? I didn't realize that there could have been a separate channel for some of the others, the video game tracks at AN.
And I'm sure they would do the same thing, just like they're doing this time, where they do some fundraising for different causes and stuff like that. Of course, the kids is the big one for Anime
Extra
North
Life.
always, and hopefully they reach that goal you guys were talking about.
Mm-hmm. Extra Life, and I think it's 2,500 Canadian will be the set goal for this year. It was 15. I think it was 1,500 last year. So, well, you guys up for this? You guys up to do a live version?
Yeah.
The real over-under question, Mike, is will any of us or any presenters be able to actually look their best and get a haircut before that tape? That's the real question.
You beat me to the punch because I knew that I knew I'd say something like that before we ended this.
That'll be me then.
Oh, me too. Me too. As I said, I look like a guy who would have been either kicked in the face or swiped by nunchucks in a Bruce Lee movie.
We have.
You just need to grow the beard like me, Mike. That's all you got to do.
Yeah, manly man, James Austin. Way to go.
I have a razor at home, like a hair cutting.
Oh yeah. I know. Well, my best friends tried to get me to purchase one, but although that said, it's not really an option right now since everything is closed in Ontario. Well, stay-at-home orders now in place. There's your quick COVID update. The numbers suck.
Not everything.
You're not saying, Kevin, that they didn't rope off the entirety of all the Costco's because they're all inessential? You shouldn't have thousands and thousands of toilet paper in one purchase?
Yeah, that's funny. That's the funny part. And for reference, the quick COVID update is, stay-at-home order was issued and came into effect on Thursday, and people were panic buying toilet paper again.
It's like they just can't get enough of that toilet paper, man. What the hell?
Didn't they tell them, like, we were going to run out, and they were still buying it that first time?
Yeah, no, it's just that's what caught my attention in all the reports. Case counts did reach a provincial record yesterday, well over 4,200, I believe.
I believe we called that last month. We were like, yo, it's going to reach that 4,000.
I'd like to think we won't see the 5K.
We'll see.
But who knows? Anything can happen right now. For reference, for Saturday, the case counts in Ontario did dip under 4,000. I think it was like 3,800 or something. 3,850 something. Anyway, that's the update. So their province has allowed cities to be a little bit more surgical and selective in terms of the vaccine rollout. So there'll be a little bit more focus on more
Finally.
hotspot areas.
I
But
mean,
the thing is, there have been pharmacies and drugstores that have been allowing people to just take the shot if there's been leftovers.
Oh no, but that's been a common practice throughout all of this. Though.
no, but the fact that there are leftovers is like a problem in and of itself. There shouldn't be
Exactly.
leftovers.
Yeah, that too. But that's been a
Exactly.
common practice. But that's been a common practice, like vaccine hunting and lining up for hours just to see if anyone else shows up. It's like trying to get a gelato, Kevin.
So.
So
All I'm going to say is that if you're not happy with all the things that have been happening, you can vote next year and make your voice heard.
yeah,
I hate to tell you, it doesn't matter who you vote for, Kevin, because we're equally fucked whichever way we go.
My line was get in line.
Well, it depends on at least you get to pick who you can get fucked by, James.
Yeah,
and that's why we continue to vote and stuff like that. But it's always a tough thing at the polls, right? And it all depends on who our local representatives are too. You have to look at that too, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's how life goes.
Anyway, that's the COVID update and basically the reactions to everything. Any further reactions to the Chris Nebelsky interview, or should we just get to the bullets?
Well, I guess the good thing being digital again is we won't have to worry about the weather, right? That's another thing.
Oh, true. Yeah, that's true.
Of.
Okay. Just before we do get to the bullets, I just looked this up, or I looked it up this morning. Hey, somebody left a comment on the website. Nobody leaves a comment on the website. This is the first time anybody has left a comment on the website, I think, in the version 2 era. And they left it underneath and you know that if anybody comments on anything, we're sure to reply in some form. So this was in the entry for the Space Eater chat last week. Douchebag Hater writes, I'm amazed you douchebags came from whatever rock you crawled under and started podcasting again after hiding for a number of years.
I like how his name's consistent, douchebag or haters calling us douchebag. It works,
Well,
and you know what? I can't believe it either. So not wrong in that sense.
Well, I'm more amazed.
Sarcastic, so we just take it as a.
I'm more amazed somebody was paying attention. But whenever these things happen, and we've had our run-ins with the replies back in the version 1 era, there's a part of me always wondering who the hell this was. So to that end, I started thinking about people who we know that we think this could have been, and the only name that really came to mind for me was Adam Grant.
Wow.
Because a word like douche is easily in Adam's vocabulary. So I texted him, and usually texting him is never really a sure thing because he doesn't typically reply to texts. And I just point blank asked him, "Did you write a comment there?" And he said, obviously his answer was no. Why? And I just simply said, well, a term like douchebag hater just sounds like it would be in your vocabulary. And Adam just simply replied, you're probably right. I would have used a hyphen, though. And to this end, this is the first time we've been in touch with Adam in the version 2 era in any form. Most of the stuff I personally hear from concerning Adam is from his wife, who regularly posts on Facebook. Adam is doing well. For reference, it is great to hear from him, but he has acknowledged that life has been very busy for him. So the invite has been officially extended for Adam to revisit, but once again, he's decided not to answer. But at least we now know he's alive. Adam Grant, everybody. But
Nice.
The only thing I say is about the hyphen line, douche. So, but there it is, Adam Grant. Glad to hear from him again. And from what I understand, he has done the odd podcasts on old movies and stuff. He has friends up in Barrie, has done the odd podcast, but he says it's also been years, and he's also admitted that he's hardly stepped out of the house over much of the pandemic, which I guess is not depending on which side of the fence you're on, could or could not be a big surprise. But there it is. The old hentai lawyer finally speaks. Okay, ready to go. So with that in mind, now we're ready to go with the bullets.
Yes.
Okay.
I thought we were going to talk about the series we just ran through.
Oh yes, that's right. We I guess before we get to the bullets, Mo just decided to do a watch party over the last hour, and we watched the entirety of The Way of the House Husband on Netflix. It's a quick watch, I have to admit. You can probably get through the entire season in roughly an hour.
Yeah, it was like, what, 5 episodes, 16 minutes each, and then it was 6 mini episodes in each episode and covered 3 volumes of manga, so we're all caught up ready for season 2, which they said will come at some point.
Yeah, and it sounded like the bookends total the better part of 3 minutes, 3 or 4 minutes, and those are the credits. You could skip through those easily.
If you leave it on, Netflix just does it for you.
Oh yeah, that too, which is what you did, right? Well,
yep.
Okay, for the first thing that comes to mind for me is Kyo in Kyoto from the Maiko House. That's the show I start to think about because they did the format was much similar. Three very short
segments.
stories. Three very short stories, and then they do a food segment in between. There's your 6 right there, by the way, for the 30 minutes. And is this becoming a thing?
I hope so.
Or has this always been a thing? Like to do an anime series sort of like that?
I mean, I know Marvel did it with like the Incredible Hulk and some of their titles back in the day with the whole motion comics type stuff, but it seems like it takes slightly less effort to produce. Maybe
well, okay, we can go back to the style and the animation frames per second type stuff in a couple seconds. I was more thinking about just the stories.
Oh, you mean John Wick?
Well, no,
the quick.
No, I mean the length of stories. The length of stories, just like it's like a little basically doing a 6 panel.
I don't think it was quite that fast, but I think that Cromartie High School, some of the episodes had a similar approach to it, where they would have segments that would be 3 minutes long, 5 minutes long. I talked about the series with a friend earlier today, and apparently there's a series called The Daily Lives of High School Boys that did a similar thing.
Oh, that show's great.
So, like, I think it's definitely a style, especially with I guess comedy and gag manga type of series.
Thank you. You did, gag manga. That's a good.
And even slice of life. And we've seen that where they'll do like, instead of a full episode, they'll do like 15 minutes or 12 minutes. And it's usually a late night anime. But this one, it was interesting that it was Netflix backing it. And they released it across the globe, so it doesn't look like it's anything that's going to be on TV or anything like that. So it works really nicely for them to do 5 episodes and then dub it in all the languages and get it out there.
So like a Gretzko, I guess.
Yeah, one way to put it.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
And okay, so let's go into the animation style because I know that a lot of the early reviews are critical of the animation style.
And that was
because it's a lot of sweeping cuts, jump cuts, no real frames per second motion.
I don't blame them.
Except if you're looking at a Roomba.
I don't blame them.
I can't. Like the thing is, does it feel like they cut corners? It doesn't. It just didn't feel out of place for me.
Some shots looked kind of rough.
Well, sure, but I think that's the idea.
No, I think some of them just looked kind of bad. But even so, I wasn't inherently upset at the lack of animation. I've seen similar things in the past, and I can't claim to be a big fan of the manga because I haven't read it yet. Because a lot of the criticism I've heard are from friends of mine who really love the manga and they just wanted something a little more substantial.
Well,
Okay.
they can wait for the live action series, or maybe it's the live action series out. They can watch the live action series.
We
I
just
think.
need it to come over.
Okay, Mo. I know you want to talk a little bit more about this style
No, I was
too.
just gonna say. I mean, like, would the animation not being the way it would that have made the show better or worse? Like, I feel like the show in and of itself is pretty great. The content's great. I enjoyed it, and I don't think the animation style being not exactly what you want it to be is gonna ruin the experience for me. I mean, if anything, it enhances it a bit. I guess. I mean, I don't know. I mean, that's just my take.
I'm sort of on Mohammed's side on this one.
I'd agree with that too.
It didn't detract. It didn't detract for me. I think if the animation came across as more fluid, I still probably would have been laughing quite a bit. I probably would have still enjoyed it quite a lot. And I guess I'm a stickler more for just a good story as opposed to great fluid animation. Uh, I know I praised Demon Slayer. I was very complimentary of Great Passage because I sort of noticed those things. Wave listened to me for because we talked a bit about the types of animation styles they used, and they were nice. They were nice to look at, but when it comes down to it, it's still you still want to tell a story.
Yeah, narratively
And
speaking, no issues at all. It was
yeah,
a lot
narrative.
of
No,
fun.
Yeah,
it was 1-to-1 with the manga, and I think the content speaks for itself. Like it won an Eisner for best humor publication, and I think with the humor and stuff like that, it was best to do it the way they did it, where it was like short and sweet and stuff like that, and you could just go in and out anywhere and still enjoy it and stuff like that. And I don't think even if you change the animation, that could detract from that. And as they said, it was a choice by the production from JC staff to go that route, and Khan, the director, said that's what they were going for to a degree. It was hard to actually limit that motion and stuff like that in their mind, which was
yeah.
interesting.
I'm just saying when I saw the Roomba, I realized, yeah, they could have chosen to do better, more fluid animation. So like the Roomba scene made it obvious to me that this is on purpose.
Yeah,
I have to say, it was see about the only thing missing for me is the main character whose name I forgot and remember.
House
You,
husband.
yeah,
Tatsu,
Mortal
Tatsu,
Dragon.
yeah. The only thing missing for that
Royal
was
Dragon Tatsu.
yeah. The only thing missing from that was him singing Baka Mitai from from Yakuza. Which was the karaoke song from Yakuza, by the actual Yakuza video game. Trust me, that's an ongoing gag for Yakuza fans.
So I think from my perspective, I have two main takeaways. The first one is, so I watched the series earlier today because I figured you guys would stick with Japanese and I wanted to see the dub. Um, so I watched it all throughout English dubbed, and it's a very interesting dub. Like some of the decisions are very clear. There is one scene where they mention, I think in the Japanese version they refer to police as dogs, and in the English they change it to pigs.
Oh
Mm.
boy!
So the
That
So,
dad
makes sense.
so it was meant to be. It wasn't meant to be flattering at all.
No, yeah, so the dad says, like, I hear pigs are smart animals. And then it shifts to the image of the police officers, and the I guess the subtitles say dogs equal detectives, but the implication in the English language is it's like, yeah, I don't know about that. I've had rough runnings with pigs myself. So or something along those lines. So I found that really interesting that it was clear that, oh, here's very obvious because of the subtitles that they've made a change to make it flow more naturally
I think
for
in
English.
yeah, and I think so that English speakers probably get their better context. We've had a version of this before when like adapting pop culture references.
Yeah. So
And
I
they've
just
done
thought,
well with the dubs for Netflix as well. So I'm sure it definitely would be enjoyable. And it's good for this type of series probably to have that in some cases because you'll be more into it and stuff like that.
yeah, and I think there were a few other instances, like I think he said roast beans for instead of saying the Japanese word. So I just thought, from a person who's really interested in adaptation and translation, it was interesting being very sort of aware of, some of the choices they made. And
Okay.
the other main takeaway was that this is a very accurate portrayal of Japanese suburbia. Like I
You're saying
lived
that they're going around with the committee and stuff like that, the housewives committee. It's like with their herbs and spices, having
their
birthday parties.
their apartment complex looks almost identical to what I lived in Japan. Like it was eerie, like with that weird field in front of the space and the thin roads kind of surrounding it. Like it's surreal, and like the type of grocery stores that you find kind of in the suburbs or in very small cities there. The types of shopping arcades, like it's despite the animation frames, whatever, it's a very clear and vivid depiction of what Japanese suburbia is like. So I really appreciated that.
Slice of life at its core, really. It was a good watch. Curious about the manga now? Because here we go. Here's your media mix in action, right?
Yep, 3 volumes down for them, and then you can start right at volume 4, and away you go. So 4 is out, and then 5's coming out, I think, either May or June.
Mm-hmm. I'll certainly say I didn't feel like I wasted an hour. It was fun to watch. So thanks for putting that together, Mo.
Yeah, that was fun.
Well,
Yeah, it was fun.
It was fun to do.
Kevin, if you watched it subtitled, you sort of have read the manga now.
But it was funny. It's been a while since I saw an anime with that many speed lines just going at you in the screen. And the other thing was I was having flashbacks because JC Staff is overloaded this season, but I still thought they've done a good job. But I was thinking back to Backstreet Girls when I was watching it too and stuff like that. I was giving memories of that because similar animation on that front, and people had complaints on that front. But I still think it's okay and stuff like that. The content's all there, and that's what counts. It gave a smile to our faces.
Yeah, as I said, an hour plus, give or take, well spent. Okay, now we're ready to do the bullets. I don't think we'll be able to fire off too many this time.
Well, there was a big one I hear this week.
Oh yeah, well, here we go. The bullets, presented in point form, but could become complete essays. And 42 minutes into this segment, a short essay. Although, we are about to talk Macross. That's the big news this week. Chris obviously made a reference to it, but that was in the immediate hour after the announcement. This is some rather significant news. This week, Big West and Harmony Gold
And Studio New
finally put aside their differences over the Macross and Robotech franchises. The upshot is that most of the Macross franchise that hasn't already seen light in the West will start to see light. And there's another significant element to this, but yeah. Well, what's the status of the original Macross series right now? Is that now in licensing limbo? No one has it?
No,
Yeah,
Harmony
no one
Gold.
has it.
Doesn't Harmony
License
Gold
is
still
locked.
have it though?
Well, under the but under the Robotech name. Oh yeah, that's entirely possible. Yeah.
So it could have been a sub-license, I guess, to Anime Ego and when ADV had. So yeah, that's possible. I'm not sure how the license went, but it was Tatsunoko that licensed it to them, and that's what caused the whole rigmarole was between Tatsunoko and Big West, because Big West is like, no, we should be the ones that have oversight on, and this is where the committee system, right, where everyone has their roles, and this is what happens when you don't have your roles. So they got into a lawsuit over who should be doing what and who had the rights to give out the rights to Harmony Gold. So that put them in a bit of limbo. And I think the bigger thing for them was the live action Robotech movie, because
Which
that
Harmony
would
Gold
put
is.
that kind of on icy water, so to speak. And at the moment, they have the live action rights. They've been working with Sony, with Columbia, to get that going. And so it makes you wonder if it has to do with the other story we're going to talk about Sony and Netflix and stuff like that.
We'll get to that in a few minutes. So I didn't think this would ever happen. Like we've made complaints about this over the years, obviously, and I know many fans have. Where's our Macross 7? I think where's our Macross Frontier? And where's the reappearance of Macross Plus and Macross 2?
But I think you touched on it too, Mike, with Chris, with Macross Frontier, and I'm thinking it too, is the big hurdle for that one. Music, as you guys said, was always a big part of Macross, and so that could be another hurdle for licensing, is the music with that series. So that's another question mark to see how it would come over and what hurdles they'd have to jump over. And for even the other licenses, until we see it in our hands, we'll see it till we believe it. You know what I mean? But we're actually further ahead than we used to be.
Yeah. I guess we could end up seeing yet another version of 7 o'clock news in all of this. But then that could, and like you said, this thing is very much about music. So that could ruin the whole thing. Kevin.
Victor Entertainment is the company who has the right to all of that Macross music, and they're the ones that are gonna be the big hurdle, because not recently, but a few months back, a lot of their anime music was put up on Spotify and other streaming services, but not the Macross music, because they just don't want to put that out, and they probably value that music highly. And God knows how much that would cost Sony, or probably Funimation in this case, because it would probably be them who would be putting in all this stuff out, should it ever see the light of day. Because remember, the article says that they agreed to allow the immediate distribution of most Macross television sequels and films. And as James said, I will believe it when I see a street date, and then I actually see it on a shelf or a digital shelf.
That's a fair, yeah, I guess that's a fair comment.
Macross 7 would also be a big issue, because all the Firebomber music is probably stupid expensive too, is what the rumor was.
Mm-hmm. I guess this is the next hang up in all of this. It's the music.
And they believe this is the price for it, but the reality and what they believe are two different things, as we know.
For better or worse, I suppose. What other angle do you want to take concerning this, though? Or can I just pose a question and see what you guys say?
Sure.
Okay. How much has all the 2 decades of legal wrangling hurt the franchise? Especially when you compare it to Gundam. Gundam's considered the big mech franchise these days, of course. That's the history. Could Macross have ever been at that level? And could it still get there?
Yes.
Could it get there? Could it get there with this significant hurdle being passed?
Macross has had no issue of adapting to the times, so to speak. We can see Macross Frontier and Macross Delta as examples of that, even though Delta wasn't that good. But it was, nowadays we have more and more people that are experiencing these shows through legal streaming platforms. Not as many people would be willing to, dig around, or not as many people would be willing to spend $90 on a Blu-ray disc, because those Blu-rays, most of those newer Macross shows do have English subtitles now.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it has hurt 100%.
And do you think it could recover? Do you think it could get to on the same level as the Gundam franchise?
I think it could.
I think it could get bigger, though.
They just need to stop making trash like Macross Delta.
I think they would, if you go the Robotech side and stuff like that, and with nostalgia and stuff like that, it's like if they do it right, they can probably bring it back that way and stuff like that. But anyway, Mo had something he wanted to say.
No, I was just going to agree with you, James. I mean, it depends on how they do it, right? I mean, if they do it right with a proper rollout and like all the proper streaming behind it, I mean, maybe. I mean, no, nothing's guaranteed, but it's maybe.
And I think the first domino that they want to look at is that live action Robotech movie. And I think that's something they've been looking at seriously and stuff like that. And how that goes could determine how they want to do their mix.
Well, it's interesting now. The Robotech could have been considered the enemy of the Macross franchise in many respects, too. now it could be its greatest ally with all of this. That's the way I think of it.
Yeah, I guess.
I mean, because familiarity is an important thing.
I
Most
think it's
Western fans getting in their 40s will remember the Robotech name. They may not know the Macross story. Not totally sure. I'm not told that they would know the Macross side of that, but they would understand the Robotech side of that.
Oh, I was just going to say, I think that Robotech is kind of their only avenue to have any chance of, really expanding. I think comparing to Gundam is a incredibly lofty challenge. Gundam is an internationally recognized symbol. Like, you had a giant Gundam in Ready Player One. People understand the model kit thing. Even if you don't really get that element of Japanese fan culture, you've probably seen the stores or have a friend who builds the models. Like the drawing, like the image of a Gundam can be chibified, it can be simplified, it can cross over with Hello Kitty. The power that Bandai has there, I think, is incredibly strong. It's probably, like, I know it is a it's a television series, but it's probably one of the most well-known sort of toy, or definitely one of the most well-known model kits out in the world. And I don't think if you showed a Macross plane or robot in a crossover movie, anyone would understand or be able to recognize it from a mass, like a mass population kind of scale. I think something even like Ultraman is probably more iconic when you're looking at design wise. Like, I think when it comes to the anime fandom, Macross has a lot of power, especially diving into the music elements, the virtual idol kind of approach. Like, there's crossover a little bit with something like Hatsune Miku. Like, there's elements there that really resonate with kind of what would be considered as the stereotypical otaku. And I think that, as James and all of you mentioned, because Robotech has that, Battle of the Planets, space battleship Yamato kind of nostalgia thing, I think it has a little bit of an edge there, but otherwise I don't think it's reaching Gundam ever.
So yeah, you think it's a lost cause in that sense. Okay,
Yeah.
Mo first, if you and then Kevin.
It's almost impossible for it to ever get to Gundam levels. The only way it can maybe is if it gets a really good live action, really gets like everyone pumped about it. But even then, I don't think you'll ever reach Gundam levels, right? It's like trying to outdo Hello Kitty. It's never gonna happen.
Kevin.
Well, I think that you just need to have another new good show to come out. It's gonna take time. Like if we look at Gundam, like, I think you had Wing, which was popular in North America, and then Gundam kind of petered out for a while, and then Seed kind of really brought back Gundam to mainstream popularity in Japan, in the sense that, like, it really was such a massive hit in Japan, and it was a decent success in North America, and at least in terms of fandom. Like, you need to just have good quality shows, and I'd say Frontier was pretty good in that sense. Delta less so. Like, Delta was fine, and idol groups are in vogue, so them going the idol route, going with the group idols made sense. It's just that the narrative was pretty weak. I think, and actually, I feel like we're overdue for a new Macross series anyway. It's been a little while. Like, just keep on making good shows. Maybe it wouldn't ever beat Gundam in terms of popularity, but you could definitely mark our own territory, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Well,
there's a niche
what was
there.
What was the most recent series in the Macross saga?
Delta.
Was it Delta? Okay.
Delta, yeah.
I know that there was a music act associated with Macross that appeared in the Songs of Tokyo Festival last year, or this past year.
Terrible love triangle in Delta too. Oh
boy. Well, isn't that the hallmark of a Macross story?
It was a one-sided love triangle. Like, you knew, okay, spoiler warning for Macross Delta, there was no competition in that love triangle. You knew from episode 2 that, okay, it's probably going to be these two that are going to be together.
Well, now you're sounding like Kat Callahan when we talked Chemical Orange Road a few months back. Okay, do we want to make an acknowledgement of the live action just before we move on? Or we can almost bring that into the next story?
Live
You
action
can almost
Robotech?
bring it. Yeah, you can almost bring it in there because
into the other
it used to
part.
be it wasn't, but they then switched gears in I think it was like 2016 where they teamed up with Columbia, which is part of Sony, to develop the Robotech live action, and it
I
does
didn't
tie
really.
into them
Second.
and Netflix
Okay,
that
we'll get to
we saw this week.
Yeah, I will say right now before we get to that, it's one of the early Rec Arts anime discussions I ever got involved in was who should play who in a live action Robotech. Back in the day, back in the mid 90s. That's the first thing. Second thing is one thing that I think could happen and maybe should happen, especially considering that the technology is there to do it. 3 words. Sharon Apple concert. As I said, the technology's there to make that happen. And it was
Vocaloid.
Yeah, and that was a key component, a key plot point in Macross Plus. And the font we use for the Anime Roundtable wordmark.
Actually, it's funny because they did have one thing when in 2016 they started with Columbia Pictures. They said that, and I'm not sure if it's still true, but it looks like Jason Fuchs from Wonder Woman is writing the script for it, or at least he still was at one point. So
I know before we went on the air, we mentioned, talked about Justin Savakis because he's been a long commentator on this issue. Is there something to add that he would have said?
I don't think so, but he was looking at, I guess, the different things and stuff like that. And one of the interesting things we're talking about is it isn't like the original Macross, because remember they took 3 series and then spliced them together to make Robotech. But the original Macross was basically the only one that really had the best success and came over. Like in the early aughts, the sub-only Macross came out from Anime Ego, and they did well with it. And then I guess that proved successful enough that ADV brought it over, and they actually dubbed a faithful version of Macross, and I guess it didn't do as well because we haven't seen it since. And I have that DVD collection from ADV,
do too.
and
I have both
good,
versions.
that dub and sub.
I have both versions myself. And I haven't watched the dub version. Maybe I'll have to dig it out at some point and try to see it.
And I guess the thing that was interesting too is that you have Mari Ujima playing Minmay in Japanese and in English. But then remember how far removed she is from those 2 rules in English and Japanese. And it was really an interesting performance from both of them, I thought, for her.
She approached it. I remember her talking about that in some press releases when they announced that she would play her again in English. And she said, I'm going to approach it as if this is completely new to me. Minmay clearly was her calling card. That's what made her famous initially. But she approached Minmay as if she's somebody completely new to her. I think that was something to that effect at the time she was announced to play her.
Yeah, and it was Matt Greenfield who directed the dub, and so he did a really great job as he usually does, but he's done other series like that before that one. Like, of course, he did Evangelion and stuff like that. So he had done a lot of things before that, so he did a great job as always.
Yeah. Okay, so all right, now let's talk Netflix. Are we done with the strict Macross talk for a couple minutes?
I can't wait to own Frontier on Blu-ray. And the Frontier movies.
Coming, under the Aniplex name. Okay.
2050,
that
right?
Would suck. That would suck.
That'd be hilarious. That would be hilarious.
I'd still buy it, but that would suck.
That might be that would that would be so hilarious.
And guess what? It isn't even a domestic Aniplex. It's an import from Japan, so you'll pay even more.
Okay, so Netflix and Sony made news this week because Netflix, what is this? quote unquote beefed up its film catalog because they signed a multi-year deal to stream Sony Pictures' big releases in the US. And this is right, and we have to
And
preface
this
this.
is
This is
U.S.
the US
rights.
right
Yeah,
now.
U.S. rights only at the moment. So,
But
which is
what
interesting.
is
And
it?
it's a 2-year audition, so to speak. So to speak. So they get first pass, I guess, at it.
So what? So basically, what? They'll be the exclusive home streaming home of the big budget films that Sony are set to do over the next couple years.
Pretty much. And the if I'm not mistaken, the way it's working out is that Netflix has right of first refusal, I guess. So any new releases from Sony has to be offered to Netflix first before going to any other streaming company for the next 2 years. But I mean, Netflix had a similar deal with Disney in like 2016, and we obviously saw what happened with that. But hopefully, this one lasts longer.
It's worth like the one thing that I'm reminded of when I hear this story is we've talked about it at length with the Funimation and Crunchyroll deals. Is this a prelude to a more diversified mainstream streaming service under the Sony umbrella? Because right now they don't have that. They might have had it with Crackle years back. Obviously, that's didn't pan out. That's not there anymore.
Exactly. It's this is all on Sony, I guess. If Sony wants to, in a year or two's time, go the Disney route and make their own streaming service where they put everything under one umbrella for all their stuff, you know, great. I guess this is just like a test pilot to see if there's any if it works. But like, I don't know. I mean, I feel like Sony's at this point now where they just have to. They should just give everything to Netflix. They should be like, Netflix, just here, take it all. Just be our new bosses.
Whoa.
But as they say, they do have a back catalog, but they definitely need the content. They need the hits. And we've seen that in the video game market too. And we've seen some of those that video games has gotten so realistic. And we're at that point in the PS5 that some of them are like, hey, let's see if we can make some of these movies. And we're seeing that with Uncharted. We're seeing that with The Last of Us. We're seeing that with Ghosts of Tsushima, which we had mentioned before.
Yeah,
Uh,
and Ghost of Tsushima could fall under this deal, right?
if
Oh
they
yeah, oh
make
yeah.
it within a certain time frame and stuff like that. But as we know, some of these projects can take time, and it depends if they renew and have a good relationship with these contracts and stuff like that. And this is U.S. only, as we said before. So does that expand to other countries later on if they do well with this deal?
And seemingly, if Robotech is in that time frame, sure,
And
could
that's
be.
what I was thinking too when I heard both of those announcements at the same time, because that could be something to juice that franchise again. You know what I mean? If it's done right.
Hmm. Well, which would be well, it's interesting. As I said, I was thinking Funimation flashed into my mind again, but yeah. Well, keep in mind other franchises and names that come up in this deal: Spider-Man, Venom, Jumanji, Morbius, where the Crawdads sing, Bullet Train. These are upcoming titles that will be subject to this deal.
Yeah, I mean the Spider-Man stuff. I mean, I could see. I don't know. It's
That's an interesting title to get.
yeah,
It's I mean, we know the history between Spider-Man's place in the MCU and how it messes up things between Sony and Disney. It's a very interesting story. Keep in mind all that tension concerning Spider-Man almost pulled it out of the MCU. It is arguably the most famous title, most famous name in the MCU. Arguably, I mean, I guess all the other titles in the MCU could take some debate, but Spider-Man is Spider-Man when it comes down to it, right? So the fact that it's not a given for Disney Plus, that is hilarious to me.
And I think that might be because Sony had already had a deal in place for their animated features with Netflix. That was
Okay,
one thing that was in place, and I'm not sure if that was US only, but they did have that in place for animated features and releases. And they actually made mention for Sony Pictures. What this includes and why I mentioned Macross is they said the banners that were included were Columbia Pictures, Sony Picture Classics, Screen Gems, TriStar Pictures, and stuff like that. And Columbia was the one we mentioned that was going to hopefully handle Robotech. So
there's the thing. There's some of the ramifications now, but it's US only. We've sort of seen versions of this already play out with some of the exclusives that ended up on other services. So up here in Canada, should we be excited or should we just not hold our breath?
kind of like ping pong, as they say, Mike. You never know. They're gonna probably go. They might go and throw the dart again, or go to somewhere else. It's just kind of like I had a discussion with you, I think a week or so ago. I put it into you guys about Crunchyroll and their physical distribution, because they had something about, oh, we're going to work with this now to do these titles to get them out physically on Blu-ray, and it's like, wow, you had a deal before with Sentai, so it's like whatever feeling they have sometimes, and then there they go, right?
Right. Fun story.
Spider-Man exclusive to CBC Gem.
What?
Oh, yeah, Spider-Man exclusive to CBC Gem.
Well, on the topic of CBC, the final episode of Kim's Convenience, I think, is this coming week too.
R.I.P. Kim's Convenience. Netflix, where you at, man? Bring that back. Come on.
I don't think it's a matter of money or popularity. It's a matter of getting Ines Choi back into the fold. Because, well, that's the story. There's a deeper story behind Kim's Convenience's end, and like some people have made some pretty roundabout accusations and given some food for thought concerning that. But yeah, it's going to be an end of an era this week with the end of Kim's Convenience, and it probably won't feel like an end.
It definitely won't. It definitely won't. I don't know.
It wasn't anticipated.
I don't know how they're gonna end. It's gonna be one of those like giant cliffhangers where it's just like, oh yeah, the show's over now. Come back, never.
I mean, it's see you, bye.
Or if they find out, they can do a special years down the road or something like that. You never know.
Yeah, it's just strange because the show ended when Choi walked away from it, and they just thought that's his baby. He's the creator and the creative force, and they just couldn't do it anymore. The rest of the producers just couldn't move on without him, which I think sounds like in some circles, it just sounded like they gave up on it too easily.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, the show was pre-approved for another season. I mean, they had storylines that were going to go places and stuff. I mean, the lead character is now like a Marvel star, and you know, the show was going to go somewhere, maybe end in a proper next season. But I don't know. It all felt so abrupt.
It will. So there's the thoughts on Kim's Convenience right there. That as I said, end of an era. Okay. Do we want to say anything else about Sony and Netflix? Is there anything else to add before we start to wind it down tonight?
I think we've probably talked enough because we've talked a lot about Sony, haven't we? Over our Space Heater and over this episode at the end.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's well, it's just, I think it's just the arms race between the incumbent mainstream streaming services continue. Everybody's bulking up as much as they could.
Everyone's hungry for content so that they can get the subscribers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Sony, I will stop short of calling them a kingmaker, but they are, like, this deal says to me also that they have a degree of control in how this will play out. Don't you think? No?
Yeah, it's possible.
I guess time will tell, right?
It's great. It's a very interesting story. It's a very interesting thing to me that this development happened. Well, lots of interesting developments this week, but yeah. Okay, that's the big stuff that we wanted to really talk about, but some other interesting things did come up this week as well. Before we go tonight, I guess we'll start looking a little bit into the anime community calendar. We haven't done so in a couple weeks. Let's go TCAF for a couple seconds. Because I know James and Kevin might be a little bit more excited about TCAF than most of us. But they didn't make an announcement in terms of a guest this week. Kabi Nagata?
Yep,
That's how you pronounce it?
Yeah, they made an announcement of her coming to the TCAF virtual experience, and that they're going to have an interview between her and Deb Aoki, and
Okay.
as well, the translator on hand to interpret is going to be Jocelyn Allen, and she's worked with TCAF many times for different manga artists she's translated for, and she has translated Nagata's works that have come out in English from Seven Seas, and she was one of the first ones that brought out these type of autobiography type works. So I believe instead, like some of them come out on Twitter, but hers actually came out on Pixiv first, and then came out physically in Japan when she found a publisher. But they were autobiographical works. The first one was My Lesbian Experience with Loneliness, and then the next one that was out in 2 volumes around from Seven Seas was My Solo Exchange Diary. And then her latest one coming out in May, which will probably be promoted, of course, at TCAF, is the one where it's My Alcoholic Escape from Reality. And I'm sure that one will be good too. The one thing to keep in note, and I always remember this, is all these stories are coming from her personal experience. So that's the thing that really gets to me every time I read them and stuff like that. I'm like, holy smokes, there is a strong person there, because I can't believe some of the stories she tells. Like, incredible.
Oh yeah.
And
And
that's
it
the
must
thing with
be,
some of these stories. Some of them are happy, but these ones that she tells aren't exactly going to leave you feeling good. But the inner strength she must have is absolutely incredible. And I'm intrigued to see what happens in the interview and what they talk about.
and once again, to reiterate, this is online,
Correct.
right?
Yep.
Okay. Kevin, do you have a thought? Because as I said, I know this is more up your alley, like the TCAF stuff.
Oh, I'll be tuning in. I've only read I've only read her first work, My Lesbian Experience with Loneliness, but it was, it was quite relatable in some aspects, and I I gotta respect how willing she was, and how she was willing to express her vulnerabilities to the world.
Hmm.
It really hit hard in some moments for me. Like I did buy it out of interest. I heard the acclaim, so I gave it a shot and was not disappointed.
That's
So
good then.
I'm looking forward to seeing what she has to say in the next month or so.
Once again, remind me, when is TCAF set for?
I think they're gonna do it around the same time. I didn't look it up, to be honest.
I believe it's probably going to be the same time as it usually is in May, usually around the Mother's Day weekend.
Yeah, that's when it usually is.
The
Okay.
8th to the 15th, right?
8th to the
Yeah, that
13th?
sounds about right. But it's going to be at the beginning of May if you want to tune in, and it'll be interesting to see how they do it this year, especially since they want to have the different artists come and hopefully promote their works online. And I wonder how that's going to play out for discoverability and stuff like that, because when you're walking around the reference library and stuff like that, there are things that can catch your eye. And it's like, man, I really want to look at this and maybe then support some artists you never heard of before, right? And I wonder how that's going to work online.
I'm sure it will work to some degree, but I do think it is rather sad, especially for a lot of these smaller artists, like the the Japanese guests. I think there's just maybe the one this year. The other more famous guests, like Geoff Smith, is the keynote speaker. And anyone with actual name recognition with a published work out there is going to be fine. But anyone who is just starting out or is taking more of the zine angle, they're I'm sure they'll still get some eyes, and I'm sure that TCAF is an excellent organization, and group of people that I'm sure will do everything in their power to shine lights on, these smaller independent, more independent authors and artists. But I think it is, it's, again, they're going to do their best, but I think it is sad that there won't be that, visual walking around type of approach.
Yeah, well, 2020 and 2021, dude. That's just the way it's been the last 13 plus months. Okay. Well, TCAF, there it is. And once again, it'll take place just before Anime North, the at-home edition. All right, just to start to end off the community calendar at least, and we'll probably mention it again in a future episode, there are little, what is it? Well, things looking for your money, I guess, right?
Yeah, one's a fundraiser and one is a fundraiser too that we've looked at before. It's like, I guess we might as well start off with the one that most people know. Humble Bundle is doing another manga bundle, and this one is in relation to the spring 2021 anime season, and they have many different manga that you can pay for and unlock. It's definitely a good deal. The only one that we've seen before is To Your Eternity, and that was
I was wondering if there was a title that I was wondering if To Your Eternity looked familiar. Yeah,
and
it was
that's
in the
because
last
it was
6 months ago.
Yeah, it wasn't the last one, but it was the one we had first mentioned about the award winners, and that one was from the creator, I believe, of Silent Voice, I want to say. So that
Yes,
was
I
one a
think you're
lot
right.
of people were looking
Yes,
forward to.
It is Yoshitoshi Oima.
But then the if you're willing to go all the way, let me say that again. If you want to go all the way, thank you. 7 Deadly Sins, the whole thing at the very end, at the top tier.
No, it's not.
This will be edited out. This will be edited out.
That thing's like 40 volumes long.
Is it still going?
It's not.
How long is this?
I think the first part ended not too long ago, and I think the second part was starting.
It is 24 volumes. It is 24 volumes plus of. I have to look this up.
But there is other ones.
No, yeah, it says it's 1 through 24 on the Humble Bundle website, but that series is at least 40 volumes long. It's not the whole thing.
Yeah, I don't think there's all of them are the whole thing from what I can see, because some of them are continuing on. Like they have Don't Toy With Me, Miss Nagato.
It's referred. You're right. You're right.
And that one is vertical. They have In Zero, which is from Fairy Tail.
Yeah. Wait, was I wrong?
Dear Kramer. And then they have one of the Slime mangas, the spin-off.
Okay, so just to clarify, and boy, did I get it wrong. And no, I won't edit it out. Because once in a while we have to stand corrected. What is it? 7 Deadly Sins ran from October 2012 to March 2020 and topped out at 41 volumes.
And this is only 24, huh?
Mm-hmm. Just for reference. So just to clarify that and make me look like an idiot. Well, as I usually would anyway. Sorry, Geoff, go ahead.
As per my self-flanderization, I also feel like I need to mention that you can find Shaman King 0, I think Volume 1 and 2, as part of this.
Correct, 1 and 2. So what's the difference between Shaman King 0, Geoff? Because that was the question mark in my mind compared to regular Shaman King.
So Shaman King 0 is a prequel series that was made about, I think, 8 years after the Shaman King manga ended. So the art style is Takei's sort of modern style, so it's quite different than the more cartoony, almost American comic style that you see at the beginning of Shaman King. And yeah, it's a bunch of sort of one-shot prequel stories, varying in quality that you can follow some of the characters before the start of the series.
Okay.
And that's nice. And then I think the last one I saw in there, Tokyo Revengers, was another one on there. So there's a lot of choice in there and stuff like that. As you said, you can give as much as you want depending on the tiers, and you can also give to charity, which never hurts as well.
I think that's the sole digital only title on that list at the moment. But then if that ends up being popular, Kodansha will print it.
As they all work.
Actually, I was surprised because I know we don't really have time to cover this, but there was a recent article on ANN that showed manga with the biggest first printings from Kodansha, Shogakukan, and Shueisha from the past year, and yeah, Tokyo Revengers is on that list. I was like,
I
oh,
did see
interesting.
that, so it makes you wonder: is that mean it's possible for worldwide if it hits the right notes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's the one. That's the first initiative that's looking for your money. The other is a Kickstarter. It's by Studio Wit, a feature-length animated film based on The Girl from the Other Side. We mentioned this title before because it was the short film version of this was shown at the JFF Plus.
And it was originally shown when it came worldwide at the Montreal Fantasia Festival and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so this time, Studio Wit looks like they want to go full in and make a feature, and they want to get the art style close to the manga as possible because it isn't your typical manga. It's almost like this fairy tale Western European aesthetic that you just don't see. It's not your normal art style you're used to seeing in manga or anime at all. And so they
Mm-hmm.
were showing what they were going to do, and it looks like it'll be interesting to see how it goes. And they said 28 days left on this Kickstarter, and they've just hit their first stretch goal, which is to add a booklet, and that's 13,000 yen. Sorry, 13 million yen. I meant to say
Mm-hmm.
13 million yen.
For reference, the Kickstarter has long met its goal, but yes, 28 days to go. Just for reference, on the Humble Bundle, there's 18 days to go as of this taping. You remember, how much do you remember of the short film? Do you remember seeing it, James?
It was a while ago when I
I
remember seeing it, but
mine.
it made sense, I guess, that it would be a short film and the way they did it because it was such a unique property. But I guess there was so much love from Studio Wit, and they're so well known for the different works they've worked on that they decided they wanted to work on it again. But since it's such a unique property, I guess they felt this was the best way to go. And they said there were other funding sources, but it's just going to be interesting to see how it all comes together. And once they get the funding and everything together, they said it'll release next year, 2022. So that's the release window they're hoping for.
Mm-hmm. My memory of I remember seeing it, but I remember just really not paying attention to it when I watched it at the JFF Plus a couple months ago. It was pretty. I just didn't know what to make of it. Beyond that,
And I guess
so
that's the thing is you could only do so much, right, in 10 minutes and stuff like that. So with more fleshed out and stuff like that, I think like 60 to 90 minutes, they'll have a better feel and stuff like that. And even though it's volume 10 just came out and it just finished its manga run, so it's probably going to be around 11 volumes in the end, they can still get a good product out there, and I'm sure it'll be enjoyable and it'll be a different thing for people to see. You know what I mean? It's kind of that thing you would go to see some art and stuff like that, and it's like, wow, this is really interesting and stuff like that, and get different people to look at anime in a different way. It's almost like going to TCAF, of course, because some of the properties they select and stuff like that cross over into different niches and stuff like that, not just the manga and anime side, but also on the comics and zine side and stuff like that with some of the people they select to come over. So it kind of has that feel to it.
yeah. Well, a lot of people want to give it a shot anyway. How many people? 769 backers already
Yep.
as of this recording.
And I know they were talking too because I was looking at the thing and I know shipping can be a little expensive, but they explained it and I've heard it from different projects from Japan is EMS is still down, so they were worried about that. So they're doing it through FedEx and stuff like that. So that's why.
Hey, okay. Well, at least maybe there's a better guarantee with it.
Well, sometimes it has hurt some projects. I know for La Mulana, it's like they had their shipping already, but they wanted to get it out to backers because it had been so long. They had to go the FedEx route instead of EMS. And I know there are other projects. Front Wing is still having issues with some of theirs to try and get it out to people. Like, what was it? The Garcia one that was the anime of the first two episodes for that one has still not come out. So I'm hoping one day it'll come out.
Okay, I think that's about it. We're tapped out. Look at it. Look at the time, dude. How much we did in this segment. Okay, I guess, well, that's all we have on the mind tonight. But before we go, a couple quick programming and personal notes. JP from Anime Lockdown, we did mention it last show. He is still set to join us to talk a little bit about Anime Lockdown 1 year later and see what the plans are there. And we'll probably get into a nicer, longer discussion about conventions in general. And he'll sit in, we believe, sometime before the end of the month. Could be as early as next week, though. But to listeners out there, both of you, look forward to that. And finally, a personal note, since we've been talking about past personalities from version 1 of this podcast, a quick congratulations to our old friend Megan Swain. On March 27th, she gave birth prematurely to a baby boy. Baby's doing well, but our understanding is that for now he does have to stay in hospital care for just a little longer. Baby Jacob was born 3 pounds via cesarean section. So congratulations to Megan and her husband. And if you want to hear from her a little bit more, she is one of the regulars on a podcast called Bad with Numbers, which I believe talks at length about movie sequels, which would be right up her alley. But once again, congratulations to all. Megan, hope you hear this sometime. And that's all we have for tonight. One more reminder where you can reach us, animeroundtable@gmail.com, @animeroundtable. Animeroundtable.com is our archive. Also, please don't forget to leave us a review wherever you get your podcasts, because reviews and good reviews might help us get this show exposed to others who might want to listen to it in the future. Kevin?
How many stars, Kevin?
Well, it would be much appreciated that you leave us a 5-star review on whatever platform that allows you to do reviews, and we would appreciate constructive criticism and not blanket insults. Thank you.
Touche.
It could have been a compliment. We don't know.
Touche. We typically do episodes once every other week, but with the way April's going, we're probably going weekly. That said, subscribe to us so you can be notified whenever we get new episodes into the feed. Until next time, thanks for listening. Good night from Toronto, and join us again for another edition of the Anime Roundtable. Wow. Was it more than 2 hours? 2 hours, 15 minutes? We're going to have to really cut this down if we're going to do Anime North.
Hey, we did pretty good.
Overall.